14th-century social, political, religious conditions. The 14th century England is a typical example of an age in transition. The old age of chivalry, romance and allegory was not yet completely dead, and the bright age of Renaissance was yet to become distinct. Geoffrey Chaucer and his contemporaries reflected the true face of their society through their literary works. The Black Death, bubonic plague, the labor unrest, the peasants' revolt, and the Lollard movement had great impact on their works. Politically, England was under the divine right theory, and the society was divided between the nobles and labourers. Economically, England exhausted its wealth on the French wars, and to recover from this there was heavy internal taxation. In addition to this, the medieval church was the most corrupt, and the religious disillusionment was at its lowest ebb. In the field of intellect and literature, the church was still the custodian, giving some maxims to the nobles and the commons. The 14th century English literature reflects all these aspects of English society vividly and picturesquely. The Black Death. The Black Death played havoc on the British Isles. In only 20 years the Black Death killed about 1/3 of Europe's population. The Black Death broke out in England around 1348, and within a few weeks it had spread to London and Bristol, leaving no place to bury the dead. The death toll was half of the country's population at that time. The Black Death also affected Edward III's campaign against Scotland. It is said that the Black Death lasted on and off for over 150 years. It struck England severely, however. Scotland, Ireland and Wales suffered less severely than England. Labour unrest. Owing to the Black Death, the labour class suffered terribly. There was a loss of 1/3 of the labour force. As a result, there was a rise in workers' wages which amounted to about 50% for craft workers and agricultural workers, and 100% for women farm workers. Employers had no other choice but to air the workers at high price. A statute of labourers, in 1351, fixed the price of labour to be on the same scale as it had been before the Black Death. Labourers revolted against this law. The statute was a failure. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381. The English society was in a peculiar condition during the 14th century. The years between 1360 and 1400 are the unhappy years. England had many setbacks in the wars with France. Besides, these were costed England very heavily. As a result, there was very heavy taxation in the country. The Black Death had taken a tremendous toll of nearly 20% of the population. Naturally, the victims were the poor and hard-working class. The precarious conditions made the working class highly angry and even revolting. At last, the peasants of Kent had revolted under Wat Tyler and Jack Straw. More than 20,000 peasants from Kent and Essex came on the streets of London, and they killed the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was also the Chancellor. They had the notion that he had imposed unfair taxes. Richard II was only 14 years old at that time, and he promised, "You shall have from me all you seek." Tyler and his men were armed and the others dispersed. Tyler was, a few days later, killed by the Lord Mayor of London, William Walworth, in the King's presence. Thus, the whole society was divided into two classes, the rich aristocrats and the hard-working labourers. The Peasants' Revolt brought havoc in England. John Gower recorded the details of this raising and the working class created in Vox Clamantis, which deals with politics and ecclesiastical abuses. This work was written in Latin in 10,265 lines. The Lollards movement. The most significant aspect of the 14th century England is its concern for religion. In the late 1300s a religious movement had started in England which attacked many of the beliefs and practices of the Church of Rome. Its followers were known as Lollards, from a Flemish word meaning, mutterer. The Roman Church deemed them as heretics, and opponents of the established order of government. The Roman Church had reached the lowest levels of corruption and impurity. Religious institutions and the clergies became worldly powers to enjoy the material pleasures. Money was extracted by the Church from the people in a ruthless fashion. Instead of providing moral guidance, the Roman Church pushed men into more despair and dissatisfaction. The contemporary literature is full of the religious pictures. John Wycliffe was a revolutionary against this corrupt church. He preached simple religion, with purity and devotion. He was the first translator of the Holy Bible into English. He started the movement of Lollards, consisting of devoted and sincere persons. They went from home to deliver the Lord's message. The Lollards movement is the first step towards the Reformation in England. To control and tame this Lollard movement, Henry IV's Parliament issued the Cruel Lauda Heretica Comburendo of 1401, which punished heretics to suffer death by burning. Thus, Henry IV became the first English monarch to put men to death for their religious beliefs. Many followers of John Wycliffe were burned at the stake. So, the 14th century England was a transitional period from medieval to the modern, from monarchy to democracy, from superstition to science, from corruption to reformation. Please subscribe Literature Guide.